some sort of crypto Tourette syndrome.
Yeah, so it's kind of like at this point they're really stilting things massively. So we get like 1,000 responses for God forbid.
Do we need lights in here, guys? Yeah. Do some lights. You want to hit the lights?
Well, I definitely put one vote in for Bitcoin. It's my favorite.
I think Bitcoin will get more than one vote. All right.
Ready, right?
It's Tuesday night, 6:03 local time here in Bali. It's time for The Filter. Welcome, everybody. Glad you could be here. Hello, Caroline. Got a great show tonight. A little something different. We like to mix it up here every once in a while. Let's see. Tonight's show is called Bitcoin Lifelines. The Bitcoin month continues, where I have gone 21 days of living only on Bitcoin. So I'll give you a little update on that. We're going to revisit Greece. Going to have a Greek tragedy update, see what's going on there. There's a few developments, so I want to keep you abreast of what's happening there. We've got a little spot from Rick on the survey, the crypto coin survey that he's conducting with coinacademy.co. So we'll learn a little bit about that and what he's trying to do, and maybe we can recruit some folks for the survey. And we've got a very special guest. Simon has dug into the whole Bitcoin futures marketplace. In fact, he has bought a futures contract. Intrepid reporter Simon is putting his hard-earned cash on the line so that we can learn a little something about futures. So that's going to be fun. And then if we get to it, we'll get to the news and the Bitcoin scape, and we might even have a chance to talk about a brand new decentralized Bitcoin exchange. So stay tuned. Let's get started. All right, let me share my screen here. Just a moment. All right. Okay, now everyone's watching the big screen like you guys are seeing here in the room. The filter number 54, we've taken the name Bitcoin out of the title because we talk about so many other things besides Bitcoin. But it's still a Bitcoin show, at least for now. We are coming to you live from, which is the fastest co-working space right here in downtown Ubud, right across the street from the Monkey Forest. If you find yourselves in Bali, hopefully you'll come visit us in person one of these days. If you're listening online, come join the Bitcoin community and the little Bitcoin economy we're trying to build here in Bali. Now, I usually say that these things happen, rain or shine. Right now, we've got Galungan going on here in Bali. So if you hear this going by the window over the course of the night, this is what we're seeing in the streets in Bali. So don't be alarmed. Don't be upset. It'll pass. These guys put on little all day, every day for like the last week, and it causes a lot of traffic jams. But it's really fun. And I give all you guys in the room a lot of credit for being here, despite the multiple parades that I'm sure you guys dodged. And for the folks at home, that's what's going on here locally.
In that tip jar, I've noticed where you said Bitcoin.
In the tip jar, yes.
Everyone's got a tip jar.
I think yes, they're those parades are to gather money for their banjar or for their whatever those kids have going on.
Cell phone.
They need. I know. I'm in Bitcoin this month, and I was walking to somewhere, and this kid came up and asked for money, and of course, I don't have any fiat money on me. He gave me a dirty look, but I didn't get a chance to spark up a Bitcoin conversation. They were anyway. Next time. All right. Oh, by the way, we have an online conversation when we're not getting together in person. We post stories here and have discussions here, and this sometimes constitutes the stories that we talk about. So the Bitcoins in Bali group post a story and get the conversation started and then when we get together and talk about that story when we all get together. We also have a conversation going on Twitter, the hashtag Bitcoins in Bali. Let's go to the next one. I've got a tweet all teed up to let people know we are meeting here live so that folks can join us on the YouTube channel. For anyone who doesn't know, we've got a YouTube channel, and I'll post the link to this in the show notes, but you can go back and watch all the old shows, and if anything comes up, we post it here. There's several kind of things there's one of my updates from Bitcoin month, so you know what you're gonna find there. It is G-rated, no cursing whatsoever. You can send it to your little cousin or whatever. We don't, we run a family show here. But check it out, the YouTube channel. It is Bitcoin month here at Hubud. I don't know if you guys have bought your membership yet, but you get 10% off. If you only going to happen this month, who knows? Yeah. Oh, did you buy your and you got the discount? All right. We have a plant right here in the audience to substantiate my claims that discounts are available. What else is going on with Bitcoin month? Last night we watched Deep Web, which is the story about the Silk Road. A lot of it was about the online drug marketplace and the U.S. justice system, but they talked a little bit about Bitcoin, and arguably Bitcoin might not be as popular as it is if it weren't for the Silk Road online drug marketplace. It basically proved that Bitcoin could serve the function of money, regardless of how you feel about illicit drugs or the Silk Road or Ross Ulbricht. I think it was a good thing for Bitcoin. Not so good for Ross Ulbricht, though. He's spending life in prison, and that's what the movie is mostly about. Anyway, we had a great time. Next week, it's the grand finale. We're going to watch The Rise and Rise of Bitcoin, along with a few other little Bitcoin documentaries. So get there early, bring your popcorn, and next Monday night will be the last movie night, so don't miss it. We've also got Bitcoin 101 happening every week. This past Wednesday, we created a whole new flock of Bitcoin people with Bitcoins on their phones so that they can go out into the Bitcoin economy and spend these things. So that was a lot of fun. We're going to do another one tomorrow at 5 p.m. local. And, well, I guess this begins my little update on Bitcoin month. During the Bitcoin month, I'm basically patronizing all of the Bitcoin businesses in Bali that I can get my hands on. And over the course of the month, I have performed 90 Bitcoin transactions, 90. If I go to the transactions, you can see these are all the Bitcoin, mostly I'll put a little bit more Bitcoin in my wallet. The way I've been doing it is, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a bit, but I've essentially been buying Bitcoins and then spending Bitcoins. And when I get low on Bitcoins, I just replenish the Bitcoins. And it's one approach. I could have purchased all the Bitcoins at the front of the month and spent them all month. And it's, basically what's the right approach? That's what I'm trying to figure out. And hopefully we'll have an answer by the end. As I've mentioned before, I am tracking all of my transactions. So here, I've only got 86 here because I was working on this yesterday, and I've had a few more transactions today. But one of the things I wanted to show you is my Bitcoin deposits. What I did was a little bit of a comparison. I'm sorry for throwing up so many numbers, but what you've got in this column, column J, are all the times I've added Bitcoin to my wallet. So this is the Indonesian rupiah amount that I was offering, or that I was adding to my Bitcoin wallet. So what I did was I went through a little exercise of comparing that to the global price for Bitcoin at that time, right? So in the case of this purchase, I basically bought, I spent 203,000 worth of IDR to get $200,000 or 200,000 rupiah of Bitcoin. So I lost 2%. So I went through this process of every time I did a deposit into my Bitcoin wallet on my phone, I figured out how much money I was losing at the ATM or other mechanisms versus if I could find the best price on the open market or even use the average price on the market. So here I'm losing 2%, 6%, 2%. But I thought it was interesting. Later on, I was getting better than the global average. 2% in my favor, 2% in my favor, 2% in my favor, and then back down under, over. And I'm still doing the analysis on this, but it's kind of my thought that maybe it kind of evens out that way. You know, a lot of people, you know, they ask me about the Bitcoin machine, and they say, you know, well, what's the markup? And they charge about 2.6%. But when Bitcoin can go up and down 2 or 3% in a single day, the convenience is pretty good. And what I've noticed is that I can be over or under versus the global average. So it's just something to think about. If you don't pay attention, like you don't really know if you're getting a good deal or a bad deal or getting ripped off. And I'm trying to shed a little bit of light on this. Of course, this 2 or 3% compares pretty good, I think, to the ATM. You know, if you go to the ATM, yeah, you know, I've heard stories of people coming from Australia paying like $8 or $9 or $10. Is that right, Deborah? Have you seen that? Any other anecdotes on? Right, and because you can only get a small amount out of the ATM, that probably ends up being a high percentage. Yeah. So really, you know, we move to a world where we don't have to get in and out of fiat currency because that's where people take their chunk, right?
So where are you buying your Bitcoins?
I'm buying the Bitcoins from individuals. I'm buying the Bitcoins from the machine. And on the 22nd, I will buy Bitcoins from the Indonesian exchange. So a multitude of ways.
So when you're buying from individuals, are you doing wallet transactions or what?
Yep. We'll look up a price on xe.com or something like that and get the quote spot price and then do a wallet to wallet transfer. Yep. And some of the ones that are like right on the money, wasn't there? Yeah, there's a 1.0. Right on the money. I think that was a person to person. So, yeah, one thing that's interesting to take a look at over the course of this month, I started right around I bought my first Bitcoins from the ATM on the 30th of June, and look at what has happened to the price over the course of that time. We've had a volatility of over 17% from low, right? So it's kind of interesting to, you know, basically, I've been getting a discount because the price has gone up. Bought all the Bitcoins at this low point when the month started, and transactions, I'm effectively selling Bitcoin at these higher prices, giving me a discount. Like if I bought sorry, here at the peak, and I bought, you know, a sandwich, I could have, in theory, been getting 8% discount sandwich because I bought the Bitcoin earlier. Of course, it could just as easily go the other way. Over the course of the last year, Bitcoin price has fallen 60%, 50 or 60% over the course of the last year. So it could just as easily go the other direction. But it's an interesting approach to just buy and sell and buy and sell in order to keep the thing. I bumped into at least one person that said, well, I can't spend my Bitcoin because I bought them when it was $800. This weird mental thing that happens that you feel like you can't spend those. I mean, he could buy some at 200 and then go buy a sandwich and spend, you know, those same Bitcoins and not lose any money at all. But he's in a mind frame of, well, I need to wait till it gets back to $800 before I can participate in the Bitcoin economy, which is a little bit counterproductive, because if Bitcoins don't flow, they don't serve the purpose of money. And then if the experiment fails, then his Bitcoin will never get back to $800. So anyway, it's a interesting thought experiment. I'm trying to do analysis on all of these transactions, but like I said, all of my finances are an open book. If anyone's got any data analysis, this would be really interested to hear from you. So let me know your thoughts. All right. So speaking of price, let's take a look at the price. Yeah, it is Indonesia where we are sitting right now. This is the Indonesian exchange, bitcoin.co.id, and it's 3.7 million one Bitcoin. A bit sleepy, but we shall see. Let's take a look at the price in US dollar average. Right now, $280.21. And yeah, it's been kind of hovering between 270 and 280. Not too much to write home about. It's funny, when it's volatile, people complain, and when it's not volatile, people complain. So I guess you can't please all people all the time. All right. Any comments on the price? Any comments on living on Bitcoin? Nothing from the peanut gallery? Yeah.
Here we are a week later. Last week we were discussing what was driving price, whether it was the Greece situation or whether it was the slump in the Chinese, or more than a slump, really, in the Chinese markets, right?
Mm-hmm.
At that point in time, we all sort of said, oh, the jury's still out, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, now that the Greece situation is stabilized and we've seen the price back off, I think it's probably an interesting observation that, the big market slump in China really doesn't seem to be impacting the price that greatly, even though China's a huge driver of Bitcoin transactions, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, both of those situations have cooled off dramatically in the case, but it's funny because they're over. I think a lot of this price variation is definitely, at least in part, due to speculators that are trying to interpret that news and how will that affect the Bitcoin price trend, right? Oh, there's problems in Greece, like people are going to buy Bitcoin. Oh, the Chinese stock market falls, people are going to buy Bitcoin. And both of those, from a PR perspective, are kind of okay. Like the Greeks, they opened up the banks in Greece. We'll talk about Greece in a minute. The folks in China basically froze like 45% of their market and created all these rules about if you can trade or not. And then they came back the next day and said, oh, the stock market went up 4% or 5%.
Never mind.
Yeah, well, and that was good enough for a lot of people. But how can you say that that is real when half the market is not functioning? It's a PR game. So many things about money are about perception and confidence and herd mentality, and the Chinese government knows what it's doing. It seems to have cooled the jets. Same thing in Europe, but I think at least the people we talk to can agree that those problems are not over. There's still a big bubble in China, and Greece will not repay its debts. So I guess those problems are left for another day.
There was some chat coming out of Hong Kong that the Bitcoin price could be a bit of a correlation with the pump and dump scheme going on with the Litecoin price. So what they were kind of discussing was that there was some Chinese that were pumping Litecoin to double the price, which went up to $8, and then exiting via Bitcoin. There's chatter that there was some covert stuff going around underneath what was going on, whether it was Greece, whether it was China, and there's some market manipulators underneath taking advantage of that.
Well, I mean, let's face it, these things are complex, right? I mean, the fact that we're not seeing big price shift right now could be explained by a wide number of things, right? There could be a shift in volume in one market that's offset in a decrease in another market, right?
Yeah.
But back to what you just said, is there actually consensus that there was a pump and dump happening with the Litecoin?
I haven't heard any more than theories from, so the CEO of BitMEX, Arthur, that was the theory that he came out with last week. So whether it's one of those things that you can't really confirm, is it? Of course, because the actors aren't.
No one's going to stand up and say,
we bet the system, because they want to do it again. Right. So it's a lot of theories going on, but it makes some sense. Like if you look at what happened with Litecoin, because I don't know what Litecoin's down to now, but
Yeah, it's gone up and down.
we typically see a bit. I agree that we're outside the ranges for sure, but we typically see a bit of a leverage action, a multiplier, if you will, on the Litecoin price versus the activity in Bitcoin, right?
So yeah,
So we tend to see wider swings and more dramatic swings in Litecoin that correlate to what's happening in Bitcoin.
yes.
But again, I think the Litecoin has been outside those norm ranges, so something does seem to be happening.
Well, price manipulation has been going on since way before any of us were born. The whole pump and dump idea was being used back in the roaring 20s, with stocks and so on. And you got to believe that there's some very sophisticated people that see the crypto space as a playground for that kind of thing, because they can get in and out relatively anonymously, and they've got very thin markets to push things around within.
And program trading rules are increasing on the traditional markets.
Right.
There's no restrictions on this side.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So bring shark repellent if you want to go play in those waters.
Or just bring Big Fanny.
Yeah. I'll punch him in the back. We have a lot of range in this little meeting we have. I'll say that. All right. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Rick. Tell us, Rick, about this digital currency adoption survey.
Coin Academy is in the process of writing the first white paper. Something we've talked about for a while. So we've teamed up with CoinGecko, with the Digital Currency Council, and with BitGo, and we're putting together a white paper on the leading digital currencies, really comparative analysis, looking both at subjective factors like volatility, turnover, those sort of things, and putting together some subjective measures behind things and weighting them. One of the ways that we're gathering data is we're putting together a survey, or we have put together a survey. It's been out now for about 5 days. I would really appreciate it if you guys would jump in, follow the link. It's on the Bitcoins and Volley Facebook page. It's on the Coin Academy blog. It's on our Twitter feed, on our Facebook page as well. It'd be great if you could jump in and take the survey and give us some input. We've had a fair number of responses right now, but we don't have the kind of critical volume that we want to have for having a really good data set. And to that end, I would also ask you, we'd really appreciate it if you could actually sort of spread the word, either tweet it out, post it on Facebook, encourage other people to get in there. Because right now, the vast majority of our responses, frankly, have been from long-time digital currency people. I mean, because one of the questions we ask is how long have you been involved in digital currency? And at this point in time, the most dominant answer is more than 24 months. Which is really digital currency dinosaurs, all right? So we need some of the people who are new to this space. We need a wider sample, in other words. So please jump in, take it, spread the word, encourage other people to take it. We're hoping to have the white paper done by the end of August, but to be honest, until we get critical numbers on the survey, I'm going to leave the survey open. When the white paper comes out, it's going to have all the comparative analysis data. It's also going to have analysts from a number of different analysts and what those numbers mean. So there you go. That's what's happening. We would appreciate your support. Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you, Gary.
Cool. Excellent. All right. You guys ready to go around the world? Let's take a look at Greece. I think this is a story that you posted, Johnny. And totally funny. What's going on here is, what's interesting about this story is when there are capital controls in any country, in any situation whatsoever, human beings start questioning what is money, and they start transacting in things besides money, especially if you can only get 60 euros out of the ATM machine. And Wow, there's some stories here. 48-year-old Sophia Marcolis is considering converting her cash into something more stable, designer handbags. You have this feeling that money has lost its value, and it's just a number. So I don't know if that's an excuse to go buy handbags that she's always wanted to buy, but it's kind of an interesting situation. I don't know how many of them are going, what the secondary market for designer handbags are going to be when people can't eat or get their.
I thought it was the best one.
There's another anecdote down here. Where is it? Let's see. Chris Dacco, what's he going to buy? He's going to buy running shoes, specifically running sneakers that will set him back 185 euros, a little over $200. He intends to spend up to 500 euros all told as a hedge against money now trapped inside his bank account.
God forbid you buy gold or something like that.
Yes, exactly. Apparently, like running shoes, I guess, if you want to throw Molotov cocktails, you need good gription, you need to be able to run fast. Anyway, check out this story. I thought this was a good one, Johnny. It's like funny and also poignant and interesting. But as far as the latest news, as of yesterday, Greek debt crisis, 2 billion euro arrears repaid to the IMF. Will wonders never cease? We've got a miracle on our hands. IMF has opened up the funds to Greece, and then Greece can turn around and pay back the IMF. Like, job done. Nothing to see here. Move along. No, actually, this is good in the short term for, I think, some people. They've opened up the banks, and people can get, I think, 250 euros out of the bank every week. It's not a daily limit, so they don't have to keep going back every day. But this party is not, or I should say, this problem is not over. Let's see here. Yeah, essentially the Troika, the European Union, the European Central Bank, and the IMF are really just giving them funds so that they can repay the people who loaned them the money in the first place. And by the way, this deal, wrapped up in this deal, are billions of dollars of state assets that Greece can put up as collateral for these new loans. And also the entire population has to change the retirement age, and they're moving, I think I highlighted the change in the VAT. Let's see.
10% up.
Yeah, it's going from like 13% to 28% or something like that. Where is it? Oh, here we go. From 13% to 23%, meaning Greeks will pay more on a range of goods and services, including taxis and restaurants. And they talked to our restaurant owner. He's like, nobody will come if I raise my prices. Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras faced a rebellion from within his left-wing Shiraza party over the tough austerity measures being demanded by other Eurozone leaders who are among Greece's creditors. What's interesting is, there was talk about him being ousted as the prime minister, but no one's calling for that, even though he's got problems within his own party. My take on that is, like, who would want to go be prime minister of Greece at this point? It's like such a flaccid role at this point, given your obligations to Europe. So no thanks. Thanks, but no thanks.
Why would the people call for his head? Like, they voted against him saying yes, and he went and said yes anyway. So why are they pissed off?
Well, there has been riots in the streets, and
they also voted for wanting to stay in the euro. I mean, they voted for two contradictory things, and the guy can't figure it, and they don't blame him for being stuck between a rock and a hard place. It's made very clear.
Well, it is clear that that's what the people wanted. They didn't want to leave the euro, but that, like, technically speaking, that's not what they were voting on.
What happened to the tough talk in the week lead up to the referendum, where everyone was saying that there is actually, and this is well known, there is actually no legal means within the euro agreement to boot a nation out of the Eurozone.
Mhm.
And Tsipras was saying that Greece was going to take you to court. We're going to take you to court if you try and take that. And then people vote on that information. And
Right.
it turns around and then all the talk is gone.
Well,
He actually got some impetus behind it to make it stand.
that's a good question. That's a good question.
Some of the stuff I've read about this seems to suggest that one of the main problems here has been the ECB's role in refusing to grant liquidity, because that was apparently within the scope of its statutes, and whatever they didn't have to, they could keep the Greek banking sector solvent without making a determination on whether. I think it all hinged on whether Greek government debt would serve as collateral for Greek banks at the ECB.
Mhm.
But I think the reason is that you're going to spend 3 years in front of the ECB, and in the meantime, it's a time-sensitive issue. If the ECB refuses to support your banking system, you'll be de facto put it out of the currency within hours. And so there's no time to pursue any other means. Really, that's the thing. You need to keep your banking system solvent while you pursue other avenues.
Right. I mean, there was talk of them being blackmailed, and it was obvious when he came out of those meetings. They spoke for like 14 hours straight in the negotiations, and he came out just looking like, dejected and defeated. And here he has to go back to Athens and present this. Like, I think some of the austerity measures are even worse than what they voted on. I mean, it's pretty absurd.
I think political waterboarding.
Oh, when he was in negotiations?
Yeah.
Yeah, he looked pretty rough around the edges when he came out of those talks. But I don't know. I mean, I feel like there's something we don't know about the whole thing, because he was talking tough beforehand.
And they backed him up in that mandate.
Right.
And
Well,
just completely folded.
But then you had the parliament vote. The Greek parliament voted, and it was overwhelming to support like 260 or something like that. So.
Yeah, but that's a bit misleading, because that was because a lot of people in the opposition were not so much in favor of the austerity policy, but they were certainly more compliant to the Troika's demand. But the defection in his own party was very significant.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that he had enough people on the other side of the aisle to support the measures.
Right.
But in terms of internally, everybody, including Varoufakis himself, who's since come out in interviews and
Yes.
done his best to remain loyal, but made it very clear that he doesn't support the Prime Minister's current line.
Right.
You said the financial minister?
The former one.
The former
Well, that
one.
was an interesting point. That, like he resigned, and then
Right. He resigned.
president goes into negotiating and gets beat up.
Yeah.
I'm
Something fishy.
I'm not at all an expert in this because I haven't followed it closely enough, but the one thing that's showed up every time I've looked at it is I really haven't seen anybody proposing what was a viable alternative, So, I mean, given the lack of viable alternatives, is it not very surprising that they took the deal?
But the IMF, right, has come out and said it's a bullshit deal. The IMF.
Right, but in the absence of a viable alternative, the bullshit deal is better than no deal.
But I mean, it's not actually solving it. All it's doing is kicking the tip further down the street. So the same shit that we've just been going through for the last 5 years is going to keep popping up because they're not actually doing any structural reform. There's no debt forgiveness going on. That's what the IMF are going, who aren't necessarily angels themselves. But they're going like, this isn't solving anything. So if Greece is like a bakery, for example, basically what's happened is to repay the loan on the oven, they've had to put the oven back in the hands of the creditors. And they don't have an oven to cook anything anymore, so they've got no way to service their debt. It's just going round and round and round.
Well, it's really.
Stop eventually, but
Well,
Yeah.
Varoufakis is arguing, he calls it extend and pretend. Exactly.
That's
Pretending. But he, of course, says that the big myth here is that this isn't talk about debt sustainability at all. It's entirely not what it's about.
Right.
It's about using financial means to secure, depending on who you ask, but to secure the policies you want without consulting the people, without
Right.
having
Right.
them vote on it.
Good point.
And
Like,
of course, the thing is that the Northern Europeans are terrified that the left-wing party can be made to seem like a success, because then every incumbent government in Europe is going to be unemployed at the next election.
very well said.
But there's nothing to do. Greece doesn't want, the Troika doesn't want the debt. Nobody does, because that's your leverage. If they repay the debt, then they're like mobsters. Mobster doesn't want you to repay the debt, because then you're no longer in his pocket. You can't use him for anything.
The other thing is, if they hadn't given the Italians and the Spanish and the Portuguese and the Irish, it would have been a free for all in terms of, what about our debt, like help us out as well.
Right. Well, and
The floodgates were open, but nothing's actually changed.
right. But Mother Nature has her way in the end. Eventually, this thing will come to a boil, and it will overcome anything that someone can do on paper. It'll just and I think that it could get even uglier. I mean, the longer this goes on, the uglier it is. It's like a drug addict. You've got like, if we can just take another hit, we won't feel bad. But and that's what has happened here. And there's no plan, because the plan B is like going sober, right? The plan B is like the shakes and every like this awfulness that they don't want to face at the moment.
I'd be curious to see, because when the capital controls got put in, there was like a 300% rise in new accounts on the Greek Bitcoin exchange, but they couldn't actually buy because they had no money. I'd be curious to see if they started buying now that they can get a little bit of money.
Yeah, no, they're buying shoes and Chanel, but maybe when they get done with that.
I wonder, do Greeks still can purchase online?
Yeah.
Purchase things online.
Sure.
So a boom of
Well, maybe they can now that the banks are open, but you can't pay an entity that's outside of Greece, or there are controls on that. I'm sure there are still controls on that. Like, you couldn't send $1 million out of Greece right now.
to buy, like 10, 15 iPads.
Right. If you want to import like your, I don't know, coffee or something, or who knows, if you want to import your goods to sell into the local market, you can't pay your international suppliers. So it's a mess.
And there's other theories that people that actually, the Greeks that have been circumventing the system, who don't pay their taxes, right, because they're notorious for it, have actually moved their cash out, which of course they would have over the last 5 years, and they were really wanting the Brexit, so that there's a massive deflation on their assets, and they just come in and buy Brexit.
Yeah. So to be continued. Yes. All right. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Simon.
Thank you, Gary.
Simon, take it away.
Do you want
What should I do?
this one? Yeah, I did a little one because it doesn't really work
Present?
if I'm trying to say.
This guy right here?
So yeah, try that one. See what happens. So I know this is going to be a bit intro to a bit basic for some of you guys here, but I thought I'd start at the beginning. So this is purely to do with what we were talking about last time, where you're holding a bunch of Bitcoin, but the value of it moves wildly, within the month. And one solution to that is hedging. So a contract, a futures contract, is between two people who agree to deliver something at a later date for a fixed price today. So an airline wants to shift passengers around the world, and that's their business. That's what they do. But the price of oil directly affects their business. So what they'll want to do generally is buy a future for oil, so that they lock in the price of oil, so that fluctuates around, and they don't care. They focus on the passengers. And clearly, one of the problems with that is the airline doesn't want to receive a barrel of oil. So what generally happens is they settle for the value at the end of the month. So if the price of oil increases, then the futures contract goes in the money, so they receive cash, and drops, then they have to pay out. But either way, when they go to buy their jet fuel or whatever it is, they've got exactly the right amount of money. So that brings us on to Bitcoin futures. This is the definition of the contract on BitMEX. And the idea is that the contract is always worth $100 worth of Bitcoin. All the P&L is in Bitcoin. There's no US dollars anywhere. No US dollars exists. Everything's in Bitcoin.
And you actually bought this contract, right?
Well, I sold a contract. So let's go on to the next slide.
Okay.
I'll explain. So, on Tuesday evening last week, after our meetup and after Blair kind of pointed me in the right direction, I took $100 and bought 0.3436 Bitcoins on the spot market. So this is just a standard dollar to Bitcoin transaction. All things are good. And what I did with this is I put a third of this into BitMEX, which is a futures exchange. So a third of it goes in what's called a margin position. And I sold one of these futures contracts. And the way the futures contract works is if the price of Bitcoin rises, the fact that I've sold the futures contract means it loses money in the ratio such that the Bitcoin I have here and this guy here sum to $100 worth. So, do you want to do the next one? This is what happened. I bought here. So I bought $100 worth of Bitcoin here, and I sold one futures contract. And then this week happened, and we're now down here $10 beneath the price of last week. So what that means is, if you go to the next slide, the value of my Bitcoins, so these guys here, I still have 3436. Those guys are worth less, $96, something like that now. But I still have this guy. This guy is now in the money. So I have made $3 or $4 worth, which translates to 0.011 Bitcoin. So if I take these two together, if I sell my contract now, I'll receive this. And if I take these guys and sell them on the spot market, I get back my $100. So even though the price of Bitcoin has been fluctuating around, it's lost $10 last week, I still have my $100 worth, even though it's, you know, I have a larger number of Bitcoin. Is this?
You're shorting.
I'm shorting the contract, the
but
future.
Then you end up with, so you sell.
I sell the future.
And then you buy it back. And then you end up, like if you were shorting a share, you did the same thing. You would end up with more money. So you buy, you sell, and then you buy when the price goes down.
But you do end up with more
Money
Bitcoin.
in your pocket.
We end up with more Bitcoin.
Say it all again.
So this was last Tuesday.
Yeah.
I bought 0.3436 on the spot market, and I sold a contract for this December Bitcoin future. So what I've got now is I've got, do you want to just go to the one after this? Maybe it'll make more sense. It's a spreadsheet of the values. So can you guys see this okay?
Yeah.
So yeah, I bought Bitcoin at $291, and on Tuesday it was worth $281. So I've lost $9.56 on my Bitcoins. I've still got those and they're fine. But I have this futures contract here, which is also decreased in value. But because I sold the futures contract, it has made money. So I've got -1 futures contract, which means I've gained $8.99. So,
and when you sell that contract, or when you get out of that contract, you've actually got more total Bitcoins than you did before. So the denomination is Bitcoins in terms of having more money later.
The value
this guy here
is
is
$100.
Right, because Bitcoin has gone down.
So it depends if you're thinking about your money in dollars or Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I think about my money in Jesus.
You gotta go to the yoga bar.
One of the concerns I had last week was fees. And you can see here, 0.5% to enter and exit a position means that at the end, so this is Monday, no, this is Tuesday last week, but today, I've got exactly $99.55.
Oh,
Even though the price has moved so rapidly. To remember here is I've entered into a contract with someone else. So although I've gained $3 on my futures contract, they've lost $3. And it's important to note that, and if you go 2 slides, so it's important to note that although I can gain money with a futures contract in the next one, I can also lose lots of money, right? So if the price of Bitcoin had risen during last week, then my Bitcoin value would be higher, $3 or something, but the future would have lost money Because there's someone on the other side who's gained. And that's the whole point, right? There are traders making markets in this stuff because they want to profit. But the same thing holds, right? I want my $100 to be worth $100. I don't care if some trader makes money on that. I'm good. I'm insulated against the risk. And then the next slide is, why would we ever want to do this? And it's because of what Gary was saying, right? He's been buying and selling throughout the month, but if he were to buy on the first of the month and hedge with a futures contract, then he would be flat in terms of US dollars.
Or rupiah, if I was spending rupiah, right?
Or you could do another contract to fix US dollars against rupiah, because that's also pretty crazy, right?
So you didn't see any IDR denominated futures contracts, just that one?
I mean, there will be on like currency exchanges, right? You can probably find a contract to do that.
Well, but assuming that I'm living my life in Indonesia, I would want to have a hedge on the Bitcoin rupiah spread, because all of my expenses over the course of the month will be in IDR, right?
If you're happy with the US dollar IDR exchange rate, like if that's good enough for you, then just do it with US dollars. But you could go the extra step further and fix the US dollar IDR rate. But obviously, the more contracts you take out, the more complicated it gets, the more expensive it gets.
And a Bitcoin IDR contract is not available?
Not at the moment. Maybe in a couple of years, who knows?
Yeah.
When all of us start doing
But for example, as a merchant looking to hedge their risk for accepting payments for their services in Bitcoin,
yes,
this provides a solution.
Right.
Assuming they can take they can be out of pocket that much capital.
Right.
I mean, if you take a look at the chart, there was a point midweek, something like that, where if you bought a sandwich in the morning, by the evening, the vendor would have lost sort of 5% of the value that had been transacted, right? So that's the idea with this stuff. Is you want to get rid of the exchange rate risk, and you can do this without ever moving into fiat currencies. And the whole goal of this is that it's 100% Bitcoin. There's no US dollars. There's no rupiah, anything like that. And I believe this is a reasonable way to control volatility whilst owning a large stock of Bitcoins. So that's it. I mean, you guys have questions?
Is there anything in the site about if Bitcoin like totally flops and goes to zero?
So what would happen then is, well, first of all, your futures contract would be in the money, and there's someone else on the other side of that. But what would likely happen is they would go bust. So this is an interesting question, and this happened a couple of months ago with the Swiss franc. So the Swiss National Bank, I think it was, were propping up the Swiss franc, and then all of a sudden they announced that they weren't going to do that anymore, and the market went crazy. There was people lost lots and lots of money, but because they had open positions that they needed to close, and because there was no one to close them, so there's no one on the other side, a bunch of these exchanges went bust. They went completely bankrupt because they couldn't honor these contracts. So it relies on A, someone else being on the other side of it, and B, in some crazy situations, there's black swan events where things go to zero. It relies on the solvency of the exchange. But
isn't this, this is the credit crunch, right? They're all derivatives which all lost their value more or less at the same time.
Yeah, the systemic risk, right?
And isn't this one of those areas where the sort of the Valhalla of trustless, decentralized exchanges are a problem? Because if something becomes a real world currency, black swan events necessarily need to be dealt with. We haven't much better ways yet other than regulated exchanges and reserve requirements and people and collateral clearing houses or whatever else.
So there are reserve requirements of this, so that's why I only have 66% of the Bitcoin, because I have to hold 33% on exchange,
right?
In case my position loses a bunch of money.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, if you get margin called, and then your position gets liquidated, there has to be someone else there on the other side, right?
And that whole scenario presumes a less than 30% swing over the course of the contract, or at least not in a time where all the buyers on one side of the trade would disappear, right?
Yeah.
60%.
It's 30% the reserve.
30% is the reserve for both parties, but you're only 30% above or below the price of the contract, right? The $100. I don't know.
I mean, this depends greatly on what you're hedging, right? Because I mean, that black swan event here would be either contingent on like another civil war in the US or something, and the currency becoming valueless overnight. But if people start doing this for more speculative commodities.
But Sydney, you said that this is a case against cryptocurrencies because there's no one in a position to come in and save the day, right?
I mean, there might be. I'm just saying that traditionally, what we have done as societies is that we've regulated exchange and imposed reserve requirements and supervised the concentration of collateral in some trusted third party. But I mean, this has been a theme in this number of these broadcasts, I think. But that's not to say that there aren't creative ways to not depend on a central authority to do this.
Right.
I think in your situation where the price is to zero, then you're no better off. You're no worse off, holding this contract than you were with just a Bitcoin position, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure. I mean, I think my point was more that like these are all questions about the what if many years from now. Like what would it take for Bitcoin to stand on its own legs, completely independent of convertibility into a foreign currency or whatever, and then those kinds of things start becoming a lot more important than they are presently.
Mm-hmm.
And that's there's a lot of grounds in which you can legitimately criticize existing fiat money systems, but a bit of sympathy for a currency which does actually have to work for 400 million people. There are challenges to it, and that's one of them.
Yeah.
That you have to take that 1 in a billion chance. You can't be cavalier about that as a state. As cavalier as you can be in the utopia of cryptocurrencies, where that's the only point of that.
Yeah. Fascinating. Well, that was great.
Well, I hope you guys found that somewhat interesting.
Yeah, that was really, really great. Thank you for preparing that. That was excellent. All right, let's see here. We've got about 15 minutes left, folks. So let's go through some of the news items that were posted to the Facebook group. This one, I don't think you guys have seen this, but someone shot this my way earlier today. Fastest growing areas of startup investment in 2015. Look at what's coming on the top here. Bitcoin, 151%. Here are some of the others: photo sharing, physical storage, space travel, transportation. Now, what's interesting about this graph is fastest growing. It looks like the longest bar, but when you take a second look, you can be the fastest growing from a percentage standpoint, but total share of investment dollars is it's quite a ways down the list. So if you ever want to show people this graph and then just ignore this one, if you're trying to convince your uncles and aunts to invest in Bitcoin, but I don't know, it's still pretty cool that it's fastest growing. I mean, a lot of people, especially in the Bitcoin space, don't realize how early it is in the whole Bitcoin scene. Most people, well, I think we're to the point now where most people have heard of Bitcoin, but as far as building out a Bitcoin infrastructure that the entire world can use, the world's not really ready for that yet. So it's great that it's the fastest growing one. I think that's a great sign, but yeah, it's going to take some time before Bitcoin investments in Bitcoin companies pay off for their investors. So a little reality check there. Any comments on that? Hospitality, yes. I wonder if there's any Bitcoin / hospitality in there.
Why the drones are so low?
Yeah, I was going to say, what was the drones like in the top row?
Let's see.
But and also, where's this investment coming from? Like, what's the measure of it? This is a good example of my industry as an accountant. You can make numbers say whatever the hell you want to say.
Well, it's a venture capitalist blog post.
But is that actually VC money?
Well, I've seen big numbers come through on other reports on venture capital spending, but I haven't vetted these numbers, so I don't
Because
really
the
know.
problem is that if one eccentric billionaire is feeling like Amblin, he can skew the numbers massively. By Peter Thiel decides to invest $7 billion in long shot Bitcoin startup, and it goes 400% up.
But also, like where the thing is now, hospitality is up 116%. So I can't imagine there's a lot of VC money going into hospitality unless there's something happening which I don't know about. So I don't know what this actual is measuring.
I think hospitality, I read this and they're saying that those numbers are coming from stuff like Airbnb, which could be VC, right? You know, it's like new hospitality as opposed to investing into giant hotels, which would probably be number one on Bali's list.
Transportation is Uber.
Exactly, yeah.
Probably,
Hmm.
Space traffic and shit.
Virgin Galactic.
Yeah, that's good.
Yes, Virgin Galactic.
All right. This one was kind of a public service announcement. I hope you guys checked to make sure your credit cards weren't a part of the hacker database.
I checked yours though.
Well, one thing that's interesting, and I listened to a talk by Andreas Antonopoulos recently, and he was just talking about how we're talking very eloquently about how we're still using 50s technology for payments and basically passing around our private keys, essentially. I mean, this is your private key, your credit card number and the number from the back and the expiry date. Like, that's like just handing over your private key to Home Depot or Target, and they've got a series of virtual armored cars that they're trying to keep your stuff safe, but it's a honeypot for hackers, etc. And
You just have to admire the beautiful simplicity.
well, you know, I read something. Did you guys check the English here? Is there your card in the hackers database?
Top
And,
class service from Nigeria.
But somebody told. Well, I read something along the lines of they do better when there is mistakes in the grammar. It's definitely true.
We're targeting idiots.
But anyway, yeah, that was good. That was Stephen who posted that, I believe. Here's one that Rick posted. I thought this was really great. This is more talk about the significance of the blockchain. And I think the article goes on to talk about Ethereum, and they start to talk about all of the ways that the blockchain can touch our lives. When I caught up with him, he didn't hold back on the scope of his vision. We will replace insurance companies. We will replace Wall Street. And then he goes on to name things like online movie distribution, gaming platforms, messaging services, retirement plans, currency exchanges, voting, intellectual property, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's exciting to think about these things. It's exciting to think about where blockchains can have a role in fair voting, or replacing things like escrow contracts, or making insurance payouts more transparent or flexible. But you know, when we were at Inside Bitcoins in Singapore, one of the fellas, I can't remember his name, made a really good point that the blockchain is not a replacement for everything. And you can get excited about these things, and it's an amazing invention. But he made the point that it's actually a very expensive, very slow database, and so therefore, well, it's basically I would question that it could, for example, replace Netflix. You know, it might be good that Netflix can have an inexpensive, high-performance database to deliver their movies on. Maybe a blockchain isn't a good fit for something like that.
I didn't post it. I hope I'm not usurping one of your tabs here. Did you see that Factum just picked up a big round of VC?
No, but that's great. I think Factum is a great use case for blockchain technology.
The other ones that we're talking about, the Central American country, property transactions. When
Yeah,
they're
title.
putting blank papers into the blockchain.
Yeah, that's correct.
Factum essentially is what they're saying. They're calling it a blank piece of paper on the internet that you can't erase. So you create a document and it's secured by the blockchain, and you can edit it and update it, but forever you can see every edit that ever happened to that document. And it's kind of an interesting idea. And then he talked about the use case of land title. If you had land title that was secured by a blockchain, you could always tell when things were changed. And it's a huge source of corruption in South America. They'll sell a piece of land, and then some politician will come by and say, oh, well, the deed at City Hall says that belongs to my cousin. Sorry. And obviously you can't tell the chain of ownership in a situation like that, like you could if there was a trustless system. So that's cool about Factum getting funding.
Late last year.
Yeah, it was a fairly large investment, fairly large tranche. I should have posted the link. I just glanced through it when I was reading about it. So.
Some other interesting applications that already exist: digital domain name registry. I think Namecoin is MadeSafe.
Does MadeSafe also do a domain name?
I'm not. They probably do. They want to replace the whole internet.
Yeah.
So yeah. Digital notary, which is probably Factum.
Financial contracts, the decentralized escrow accounts would be like Codius.
Yeah. So let's see. I think that might be all that I highlighted here. But it's a good article and really thought-provoking. And we got all excited about the Bitcoin price and forget about some of the significance of the invention of the blockchain and what it can.
This is a really good publication if you don't follow it.
Yeah, they're serious technologists, right? Is it electrical engineering?
Institute of
Yeah. Super smart people with huge brains.
Look at the brain on that.
So speaking of blockchain technology, these guys just announced, this was on the front page of Reddit today, and I know you guys can't read Reddit because it's blocked in Indonesia, but I'm here to deliver the goods, be your window into the outside world. One thing that's interesting about this, though, is, and I'm always leery, download. Like the first thing, there's one sentence and then download. And that's one thing that I never do with anything that has to do with cryptocurrency or Bitcoin or anything, is download a piece of software and run it. These guys, I'm not saying anything about these guys. It's just in general, you can do that. Like you got your Mac, like you think something's cool, you download it, run it. But when you think about it, any application you download to your computer, you give execution rights. I mean, who knows? In the background, it could be sifting through all of your text files and looking for your mnemonic for your blockchain.info wallet, or looking for your private keys. You want to be very careful about doing this with a computer that you also use for Bitcoin. The other thing that I wanted to make you aware of is when you're dealing with software and you want to run software that you're sure was produced by the developer you think it is, they will produce what's called a hash of the file, which is like a fingerprint, and they'll put that on the website. Put the file, run a little program on the file that you've downloaded that gives you the fingerprint, and if the fingerprint doesn't match, then you know you're not getting the software that the developer intended you to have. So if you didn't understand all that, don't worry. It's just something to be aware of, especially when you're talking about Bitcoin software. You don't want to run a bunch of Bitcoin supposed Bitcoin software on your computer without knowing what you're doing.
Sorry for the dumb question, Gary, but what is being exchanged here?
Bitcoin for fiat currency in a decentralized way.
How?
Well, funny you should ask. Actually, I don't understand it fully, but yeah, download. So essentially, what they're this is kind of a cool little slideshow they've got. But essentially, what they're saying is that each party has to put up into escrow. It has to have Bitcoin to cover both sides of the transaction until the transaction is complete. So let's see if we can walk through this. So this really hot girl has the
Hell, I'll sell my Bitcoin for $1,000.
I think I'd rather meet her in person than doing that in a trustless way. So they get paired on the CoinFiend network. So it's a so they get paired up and in a peer-to-peer way. How can they perform the exchange if they don't trust one another? Okay, the trick, apart from the money to be exchanged, Bob and Sarah will have some Bitcoins to be deposited as a guarantee, right? So here's your little Bitcoin deposit from Bob, your little Bitcoin deposit from Sarah. So obviously you can't buy your first Bitcoin this way. You have to already have Bitcoin, at least as much Bitcoin as you want to buy. So that's kind of an interesting thing about it. But they're putting that up in some sort of collateral situation, maybe some sort of a shared transaction or locked transaction. At this point, the first step is to create such a deposit simultaneously using the properties of Bitcoin, la-di-da. The value is exchanged in predefined steps. The local currency is transferred through a payment processor that supports non-reversible payments. That's kind of a trick, right? PayPal's reversible, credit cards are reversible, wire transfers are even reversible. That's one of the things why Bitcoin is so cool, because it's not reversible. But if you can find this non-reversible payment mechanism, besides cash in person, which is not what we're talking about here, yeah, how do you do it? Maybe you put the cash in an envelope and you mail it. So that's a bit of a trick, but the value is exchanged. The local currency is transferred through the payment processor that supports non-reversible payments. If one of them, for example, tries to cheat on the round of exchanges, then presumably the deposits then cover the losses, right? So there's some sort of mechanism where the deposit that both have put up as a safety for the transaction revert to one or the other if someone doesn't follow through on their end of the bargain. Does that make sense? I won't read everything here.
How do they verify that the transaction actually
I think
so someone could cheat and lie about sending it, right?
I think they're probably using blockchain, right? Some sort of consensus system.
Well, say,
Yeah.
say I send $100 in the mail.
Yeah, well, that's the whole non-reversible payment processor.
Right.
What the hell does that mean?
yeah, that's the trick right there. I think
Yeah.
I can't off the
It's
top of my
interesting
head.
how that's nicely undefined in the slideshow, isn't it?
Yeah.
So this is all sitting on an exchange. So
No.
you don't actually have Bitcoin
No.
until you pull it off.
Well, this is a decentralized exchange, so there is no centralized exchange. Presumably whatever consensus network they've arranged enforces the rules, and if someone cheats, then the system itself reverts the deposit one way or the other.
Sort of really just like acting as a middleman to facilitate peer-to-peer transfers.
Right.
I haven't heard of this before, though. It's interesting.
I haven't heard about it either, so it's
It's
funny it just pops up like this.
well, I've actually heard the name CoinFiend going way back. I think they've been talking about this for a while. They've certainly been talking about decentralized exchanges for quite a while. And but the problem is always dealing with the fiat money system. The fiat system is the problem.
If you compare it to OpenBazaar, that's also totally decentralized. What you have is a third party that has escrow. So you have like a trusted third party with a reputation.
Okay, so they use a
So,
reputation system.
Yeah, they use a reputation system for a third party that can verify that. The
Even though you may not
transaction
know
was
that
correct.
third party, you know the third party's reputation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
the thing. So anyone could be like an arbiter on
Right.
OpenBazaar, but you need a reputation to.
Right.
As an arbiter, you also need to put in some bitcoins to start.
Right. With some guarantee money that you lose control of and that the system arbitrates.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I hope it does work because I think we need this kind of thing. Actually, Mt. Gox failed in the spring of 2014, was it? And all of the exchanges I use you still lose control of your Bitcoin while you're trying to make that transaction. So we still live in this world where you've got if you've got a couple $1,000s on an exchange somewhere, the exchange could disappear, and so do your Bitcoins, and there's nothing to guard against that.
There's some now that can prove that they have your Bitcoins and they're not doing nefarious things with them.
Yes.
But there's obviously, risk involved.
The other changes that have an agreement with Bitco, so they have multi-signature
Okay.
on the Bitcoin.
Right.
On their core wallet.
Right.
So,
But it's a fascinating idea, and I hope they succeed. And if anyone here wants to download it and give it a try, can report back. We are out of time. That's all the time we have. I just want to remind you that Bitcoin month continues. Remember, you can get a 10% discount here at Ubud. And tomorrow we'll do our Bitcoin 101 at 5 p.m. So send us your noobs, and we'll set them up. And next week on Monday, we're going to watch the rise and rise of Bitcoin. It's the finale of our Money Movie Monday for the month. And so, join us for that. And otherwise, we will see you same time, same channel next week. Thanks for coming. All right.
What's the last slide? The last tab.
Let's see.
You're on the side.
Hopefully.
Your tabs.
Your tabs.
Oh, if we ran out of time, I was going to have a little discussion about the Deep Web movie that we watched. Go and watch the trailer. And
For those of y'all who are genuinely tech friendly